that said, I want to get started. I have to say one of my first meetings with this chapter as a council member was with our county executive, Marc Elrich, and I'm so glad to have you back again. I know you are on a very, very tight time frame, so we want to make sure we maximize it. For those who join later, we'll have about half an hour with our county executive, and then we have, I wanted to also acknowledge Ken Hartman Espada, who we've been working with very closely as our municipal liaison, and he will be staying on with us to help capture any additional questions that are not covered within the half hour. And we do have some newly elected folks, so I want to just let them know that this is part of our annual meet and confer, and we really value and appreciate this time to hear about the updates and the leadership initiatives you're taking at the county level. So with that, welcome to our Montgomery chapter meeting, and the floor is yours.
Thank you all very much. And I spent 17 years, 18 years, 19 years going to these meetings as a council member from Tacoma Park. And back in those days, the hot topic was, should we sue the county over the tax duplication? And I used to always advocate that we sue the county. And when I came to be county executive, I think I opened my first meeting by discussing that maybe you have to sue the county. I mean, I've always recognized sort of the inequities in the municipal tax duplication process. And I'm happy that I'm here today and being able to talk about the fact that we've solved this finally. And we've got a path to go forward, and it's going to work for everybody. And it's going to make the municipalities whole. It'll make your taxpayers happier. And I actually feel better about what we're doing. It was a long time. This is, called the meet and confer with the county executive. So I was on when Duncan was here, and we used to refer to it as the meet and be told what you're going to get. Because there was no conferring back in those days. So I'm really happy to be here. I know what municipalities do. I had a very firsthand look at, the duplication issues when I was a council member. I remember one year where it was pointed out to us that our entire public works duplication payment would have paid the Pepco electric bills for the county on the streetlights, and none of the work that we were doing on roads, sidewalks, and other infrastructure in the city. So I've had long experience with this, and I'm really happy that the bill 222 was introduced, and it's being well received by the county council. I expect that it'll go through unharmed, and they've scheduled action for it tentatively for March 1st. So I just wanted to start with what I think is, good news. And as somebody once said, peace at last, peace at last. I think we're in a better place now. Talk a little bit about COVID. I continue to think we've been doing amazingly well. We're the most vaccinated jurisdiction in the country. That's a large jurisdiction. Laura Ingraham notwithstanding. I don't know if any of you got to see that delightful little show she put on, but we've worked really hard to keep people safe. And just, from one of the earliest realizations that I had when COVID was new and we weren't sure what was happening and no one knew what was happening and what the prognosis was. I had a really good health officer. Travis Gales was strong and he was smart and he understood it. And we talked a lot about this, and it came down to, we recognized that COVID is basically person-to-person transmission. It doesn't lurk in air ducts. It doesn't lurk on surfaces. It's basically, you've got to breathe on somebody or get the germs from somebody for this thing to spread. And it doesn't do much of that if that doesn't happen. And that's why we focused from the beginning on making sure we limited human contact, as hard as that was to do, so we could limit the spread of the COVID virus. And once we did that, we went from, we were the first place in the state that got hit. We went from the worst place in the state to the best place in the state because we stuck with what we knew worked. every time we deviated from the governor and the governor opened up more stuff, we could see the cases going up and we saw the problems going up, and ours stayed relatively stable. If we had an upward curve, it was nowhere like the state's upward curve. So I think, we were validated. And I will say, I think that the fact that our residents knew that we were different than what was happening around us gave them the confidence, I think, to follow the kind of directions we tried to provide. So I give a lot of credit to the residents of this county, who could have been like people in other states and other counties, even in Maryland, and just said, we're not doing it. People were smart enough to realize that this was important and it would contribute to their long-term health and well-being. And so I was deeply appreciative of the support from the residents and what the residents did. And we've, tried to help the municipalities out through this. We continued, I think we developed a good partnership. I know you had regular meetings with Rich. So we were able, I think, to stay in touch and make sure that we understood what your needs were as we were dealing with our needs. And I think it's made this a much better place. We're going to be lifting the mask mandates. I still think it's a bit premature. Now we're in substantial instead of high transmission, but substantial transmission. If we were on the other side of this, as things were getting worse, this is when we were shutting things down. It was not the point where we were opening things up. And my comment to Hogan is, I wish you would just wait till we get to moderate transmission. I think we're going to get there relatively soon. I'd rather wait a few more weeks. The more cases we get, the more sick people we get, and there will be some deaths from that. So anything we can do to knock down the cases is important to me. I remember in the early days watching those scenes from New York City with the gurneys and the freezer trucks and people hauling people out of buildings armed, that were dead. And I'm like, I'm never going to see that happen here. And it was kind of a stark reminder of what could happen if things went wrong. So for me, that was kind of a lesson in how to deal with this. So thank you all for your work with us through this. And I think the partnerships we developed then are going to last as we go forward. I'm going to talk a little bit about the county's operating budget. We are in a, I guess, interesting place with the budget. The state appears to have made a mistake. And so while we were doing really well in the first disbursements in the year, suddenly in November, we had a downtick in disbursements, and all the counties started experiencing lower than expected revenues. And what happened, the state actually came and said, this doesn't make any sense. We're showing record income tax, and the counties are getting lower than expected revenues. That didn't make sense to anybody, didn't make sense to Rich. So the state's been digging into it, and they think they found the problem. And they're telling us within, a couple of weeks to a month that we'll be getting supplemental checks to hopefully correct everything that's off. We're off by about $43 million, but hopefully correct that and more, because in most of our other revenues, we're actually pretty healthy. One of the things about COVID in terms of who got hit the hardest were, low-income frontline workers, people in restaurants and retail. Most of the professionals I knew kept working, whether it was, teleworking or occasionally going into an office. But people on the front lines of stores that closed lost their income. From a perspective of budgets, those are the people who paid the least income taxes. So it had the least effect on our budget that it could have had. So we didn't lose as much revenue as people anticipated. And Rich and I wish Rich were here tonight, but he has a family obligation. We had long talks about what to do about our own projections as we were going into the first, second, and third year. And we decided that the universe wasn't going to collapse, that we weren't going to be short $500 million, and that this was not the recession, but this was a more targeted economic damage project, and that we wouldn't see the losses that had happened during the Great Recession. We were right. We didn't get all the revenues, but we were able to make our budgets whole with federal money. That last tranche, after the key election of 2 senators in Georgia, probably made all the difference in the world. We were able to get through last year's budget with the infusion of money, that it made a big difference in the county. And this year, we're not dependent on an infusion in money. So that's how far we've recovered. Now we're just hoping that we've got enough money to actually expand some of our programming. We've not given hardly any increases to any of the nonprofits that work in the county. We've had a policy for basically 2 years of same services budgets, no increases in much of anything, because we didn't have the revenues, and we didn't want to rely on federal revenues for new programs, because you don't know when the federal revenue is gone what you're going to replace those federal revenues with. So we were real careful about how we spent the money. We are at 11% reserves. The county's target was 10. We had never, ever hit 10 before. We were at 11. Our pension funds are fully paid. We are probably overly paid on our employee retirement health benefits. So we sit in a pretty solid place. We're not going to be worrying about our bond ratings with these numbers. And so I go into this budget relatively optimistic. So we're looking to bump up money for some of the nonprofits. We're trying to figure out how to deal with the hospitals. I don't know if you know what they're dealing with, but $10,000 a week nurses, where their normal nurses were making $90,000 a year, is what they're dealing with. And they've lost an enormous amount of their staff. And when nurses see these traveling nurses come in and get $10,000 a week, the $90,000 a week nurse is saying, I can't do this. I'm just going to quit and become a traveling nurse for a while. And so then they wind up hiring people as traveling nurses. So we're going to probably have to help them get through this. The state of Maryland healthcare system has a lot of good things in it, but one of the limitations is the hospital's ability to raise revenues or raise their rates. And so they actually can't raise their rates to make up for these losses at all, unless the state authorizes it. So this is definitely bearing on them. We expect to make some progress on infrastructure. So we've set a record amount of funding for the school system this year, so they can get the buildings built they needed. We reached a breakthrough agreement with the school system. They're going to pay prevailing wage, which means they're going to pay a little bit more on the front side, but on the back side, the county will go from only getting 20% reimbursement for our school projects to getting close to 50% reimbursement. So we're getting a lot more money than we were spending as a result of doing the prevailing wage. And so that's going to help us deal with the school capital budget. And I'm really excited about that, because people worked on that for a long time before we were finally able to get it done. Think what other goodies are in the budget. BRT lines, one on 355, the one between Rockville and Rockville and I think Germantown, and in Germantown to up to Clarksburg comes later. We had a very exciting meeting. I haven't had the meeting yet. Tom Lewis, who's working for me now, had a meeting with the governor's staff about funding for BRT projects in the Whitefield area, basically from Bethesda up to Shady Grove, and also an academic project we're looking at. I'm actually really excited, man. I get this rap as the anti-developer guy. I think I've probably approved more deals than anybody's approved before. I got the projects, 2 of the projects that were stuck in White Oak going. And White Flint, I think, is going to become a very exciting place. We've got an MOU with WMATA to do a joint development agreement on the White Flint Metro site. And that site, they hired JLL, Jones Lang LaSalle, to assess what the highest and best use of their White Flint Metro was. And Jones Lang LaSalle came back and said life sciences. And they said, in fact, you should probably do life sciences around all your metros. But the right thing, the right play for your property in White Flint is life sciences. And we already have all the major developers have beginning to flip their projects to life sciences. We're going to turn White Flint into a true life sciences center. We're working with the University of Maryland on bringing graduates programs. We signed after 2 years of negotiation. Everything seems to take 2 years around here to negotiate. But we got the university system to agree to bring graduate level education and training for life sciences to Montgomery County. We're the only life sciences center in the country, and we're ranked number 4, the only one with that's not anchored by an academic graduate level institution. And so getting the university to agree to bring that kind of academic presence to Montgomery County is a big deal. And we're looking for additional work in computing, particularly artificial intelligence. And that was one of the projects we discussed with the governor. My goal is to try to bring an artificial intelligence program at the university level to White Flint to partner with the life sciences, because life sciences is increasingly going to the computer world. It's no longer just wet labs, but it's wet labs and what they call gray labs, which are their computers. And that's a big deal. I think we're gonna make Montgomery County, if we don't get to number 1, we're sure we're gonna get to number 2. It's gonna bring a lot of jobs here. Jobs are gonna spur the housing market. The developers have said that the lack of housing is flat out due to the lack of jobs in the county. And if we can grow jobs, we'll start growing housing again. So I'm optimistic about the future of Montgomery County. And I think you should be too, because getting to build back a reputation for the county that can do something and to put a gem in the middle of the county is the kind of thing that increases the value of all of our jurisdictions, because it becomes a place that people want to be. So I've been working on this thing since I got here. And I'm really happy to see the point we're at right now. And I should be meeting with the governor probably in the next week or 2 to talk about, what he can do to help us. And basically pitch them the first time I talked to him that I can bring, 11 million square feet here, the same as Amazon over the next decade, except it'll be life sciences and projects that have high value to the county. And I said, I just need you to offer me some of the support you're going to offer Amazon. And he didn't say no. He said he actually liked the idea. So we'll see. So you got some minutes left. I'll let you guys ask some questions.
First, I wanted to just also extend a very heartfelt thank you. I think this time last year, we're in a different spot. I think the collaboration, particularly on COVID planning, we had 15 municipalities helping to distribute test kits en masse, and also, really collaborating on testing and what we need to do across the county. So thank you to your staff for that. And also, again, on tax duplication, we're feeling very optimistic that in March we'll have a positive response, and this will not be a key agenda item at our meetings. But I just want to say thank you for that. And I know my colleagues and I will also just give a quick clap there.
Thank you.
Yeah. With that, I know that you only have about 5 minutes. Well, let's see, 10 minutes or so. So I just want to open the floor for anyone who has questions.
I don't have a question, but I do want to thank Marc for allowing his staff for the weekly meetings that they did during COVID. They were extremely helpful. So I just want to, I know you've mentioned it, but I've been on many of those calls, and it's just been incredibly helpful to have the support from the county and the information. And we miss Dr. Gales as well. He was a great person to work with. And but I'm glad he's moved on to another sounds like a great opportunity. And I understand from Rich Madalino that Dr. Stoddard needs a vacation. So I hope you guys will give him a week or 2.
I took a weekend.
Sometimes he can't go on vacation because the things go up when he's out of town.
Look, I went on vacation. I went 2 days in October, and the last time I'd gone away was 2 days in October of 2019. So that's what I've been doing. That's exciting. I feel the same way, because this thing is not particularly, well, it got worse again, but you think you're out of it, and then you're not.
Right. Well, again, thank you for having your staff do that for us. That was very much appreciated.
I didn't hear the work on climate change, but I did want to congratulate the county on the EV co-op. And I know many of us have also been leveraging and building on the climate action plan. So wanted to acknowledge those efforts as well. So
I wanted to, I think you all were inviting you, particularly the ones that own multiple buildings, to come to a presentation from a company that basically they are managing the HVAC systems for the entire Hillsborough School District, over 200 schools. And they basically do what are called ESCOs, where you wind up paying for the private company provides the capital. The contractor who you pick, so it goes through the regular bidding process, does the work, and you pay for the work and the equipment out of savings in your electric bills from the stuff they've put in. The county's done a couple of projects like that on our own property. And so it takes these projects out of the capital budget and puts and just leaves it in the operating as a utility expense. It's called energy as a service, as rather than energy as a commodity you're buying from somebody. So I want to give you the opportunity to at least listen to the meeting and see whether you think this is worthwhile, because a bunch of you have got multiple buildings, and you may find that somebody can come in and upgrade your buildings and figure out how you can pay for it in a reasonable way without bumping up your capital budgets. That may be useful to you. It's useful to me because capitals are constrained on how fast we deal with climate change. So if I can solve the capital problem, I can do things faster.
Thank you.
Andy.
If we can work with you to get the information, we can share it with.
I
all of our
just
members.
wanted to ask Mark what your crystal ball tells you about what the county council is going to do vis-a-vis Thrive and some of the problems that have been occurring with the planning board.
I wish I could predict it. I think there are serious issues that have been raised about the processes of the planning board, and those are the only ones you've read about so far. I suspect there's going to be more. The other thing is, I think Thrive's a mess. I mean, the OLL report kind of called it out. It's absolutely inequitable, and it produces no affordable housing. And, they started out saying they were going to build missing middle, and everybody thinks missing. If I asked most of you what missing middle was, everybody thinks, oh, that's the middle priced housing between the lower income housing and the luxury housing, and that's missing. And when they did their own analysis, they looked at Silver Spring and they did an analysis of what would happen if they did missing middle in Silver Spring. They came back and it was more expensive than the houses that were there already. Because we all see this around our communities. If you're in a community with $800,000 townhouses and somebody puts high-end townhouses on the edge of your community, they pretty much go for $800,000. EYA has no problem building the 3-story elevated, $1.4 million townhouse. And so the townhouses are going to be built to the market. And I've talked to real estate agents, and they're like the same way. If the price point in the neighborhood is $1 million, then people will build $1 million townhouses. If the price point is $500,000, they'll build $500,000 townhouses. So you're not going to get the affordable housing that people, we're looking for. I'd be happy to talk with some people offline. I can never do this in the time I have, about what we think, the issues are with Thrive, and probably what we ought to do about stimulating, more housing development. But I do know that Park and Planning did a study on White Flint, asked the developers why you're not building. And they came back and said, we're not building because there's not a market. And people who are here, the incomes are too low, and we need more and better jobs to fill the units that we want to build. So we do need jobs to drive some of this, which is why I've kind of been minorly obsessed with dealing with the economic growth side of it.
Thank you.
Well, I know you have, was that Shana?
Shana?
Yeah,
Hi,
go
Mark.
ahead.
How are you? I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to get your thoughts briefly on the current state of pedestrian fatalities in the county. It's really been, I think, alarming for, many of us, especially parents, to hear about so many fatalities, and with all the county's Vision Zero efforts and so forth. If you could just talk about kind of the state of things in the county and what you're envisioning for kind of next steps to improve things.
So, part of this is it's a national phenomenon. We have no idea what's gone wrong, but apparently people have become insane when they drive. There's just, I don't know whether they got used to not seeing people on the street and assumed that there's nobody walking across the street anymore, but it's been a real problem. So, we're looking at a couple of things. When I first got elected, I looked at what they were doing in DC. They were using these flex poles, and we hadn't been using flex poles. So I started pushing on using flex poles, and you're going to see a lot of flex poles going out because it squares the corner and it forces cars to absolutely slow down as they go around the corner. And before Greg Slater left, I asked him if he would be friendly to letting us use flex poles on state highways in areas near urban, where they're more urban. And he said yes. So we could extend this, more seriously through the county. And the good thing about it is a very low cost touch that has a really big benefit. So I look forward to using more of those. We're building, islands. You're seeing more of these pinching roads with islands in the middle and poles on the sides, so the cars actually have to slow down. We built our roads for traveling 55, and we're telling people to travel 35, and it's just way too easy to speed without feeling any, impediment to your speeding. So we're going to have to make the kind of changes that make it harder to drive so fast. The other thing we're doing, we used very successfully the Abuelina character for our effort on COVID. And we're going to try to use the same character for the Hispanic community on pedestrian safety and driving, because if you look at the numbers, they're disproportionately Hispanic and have been that way for a while. And when I was in Colombia, South America, I was visiting my son, I noticed they had signage up. It was much more emotional. It was not, scary or rational. It was, I want to see my mom come home, and with a kid doing it. And so I think we're going to look at, changing the messaging we're doing, because the messaging that was done before really didn't work.
On that note, I know you were on the event on Saturday, and I was there as well, related to Vision Zero. My question is also, a lot of the serious crashes and fatalities are on state roads. And so to the extent that we can, across the municipalities, collaborate with you on the hot spots,
Yep.
to better advocate to the state, because we can do everything right, but if we don't get the state roads right, we're still going to have a lot of problems.
Yeah, we're happy to work with you on that. The new Secretary of Transportation is going to be a disappointment. I mean, he's not Greg Slater, and this is not his thing. So we'll see how that works, but hopefully relief will come in November, and we'll have people at the State House who actually are vaguely interested in what we're doing. We'll make more progress, but we'll work on it. And whatever applied to me regarding state roads and poles probably applies to you guys. I would do something to ask forgiveness.
Thank you. Well, I know that you're at time, and I want to wish you all the best. And again, thank you for the increased collaboration with us.
It will continue. It's a good relationship, and it's good to get this out of the way, because we don't have this thing haunting every discussion we have anymore.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.